Tansi. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kawis. I am the Executive Director of Great Plains Action Society. I am Plains Cree Saulteaux of the George Gordon First Nation, and I've been here in Iowa, living in Iowa for 15 years now. And as many of you know already, Texas has implemented a near total abortion ban, along with some very disturbing stipulations that encourage private citizens to enforce the law rather than the government. And as an Indigenous woman, I firmly believe that banning abortion is an act of violence and colonization. And so today we're here to talk about this tyrannical ban that is systematically disenfranchising the rights, freedoms, and health and safeties of women and childbearing folks. And we're here today to talk about the fact that we have a very serious white Christian problem in this country. We have an infestation of problematic people with control issues, largely working under the Republican Party or the umbrella of the Republican Party, with a handful of wayward Democrats who want to regulate childbearing bodies because they're stuck on these antiquated notions that subjugate women, essentially, and oppress trans and BIPOC folks. Texas has a lot in common with I'm so sorry. This guy is really getting in my way. Texas has a lot in common with Iowa. Iowa has been attempting this ban for a long time as well. So the worry is that now with Texas setting a precedent, everything's going to fall like dominoes, just like they tried to do a few years ago, and we're going to be facing something very similar here very soon. And in fact, there are, I think, 60 legislators in Iowa that are already calling for a ban. So I'm really honored to be joined by our guest speakers today, Rocky Gonzalez and Chelsea Chisholm Vargas, both experts in the field working to prevent and push back against such laws, to provide Indigenous opinions, to provide, BIPOC opinions, women's opinions, childbearing opinions about this unconstitutional move, and they fight to increase pro-choice solidarity across the country. Chelsea is a Peruvian American, first-generation Iowan, born in Des Moines. She is an advocate for reproductive justice and has worked alongside countless advocates and leaders in the space through her professional employment and personal life. Being an Iowan is a critical piece to her reproductive justice advocacy, as Iowa politics has stripped away, at sexual and reproductive health immensely in the last few years. And Chelsea has been organizing every step of the way. Rocky Gonzalez is an Indigenous Icana from, I always have a hard time with that word, Icana, from the Texas Rio Grande Valley, residing in Austin for 20 years. She's a longtime activist, facilitator, and organizer. Rocky finds joy in the work of anti-racist operations, movement infrastructure, and consulting for equity. Her mission is to grow up alternatives by operationalizing anti-racist values with a transformative, compassionate, and decolonial approach rooted in Black feminist theory and Indigenous knowledge to dismantle white supremacy. She's the founder and board chair of the Frontera Fund in Texas, deputy director of the Austin Justice Coalition, and an undoing racism trainer with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. So I'm going to add them to the stream and welcome them today. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. I would like to just allow you a couple minutes each to, introduce yourself, if there's anything you'd like to say, and then we'll get into the conversation. Rocky?
Hi, thanks. Kwali, good evening. My name is Rocky. I use she, her pronouns. And like Sakas is saying, I am from the Texas Rio Grande Valley, which is for those of you unfamiliar with Texas geography, it is the tippy tip of Texas, and it is borderland. So where I grew up. It's about 20 minutes from the Mexico border. I am the founder and board chair of Frontera Fund, which is an abortion fund in the Rio Grande Valley, which means we pay for abortion and we offer practical support and a variety of other logistical and practical support needs that people, face when they're trying to access abortion care. And I am so excited to be here and to have a conversation about abortion that is happening between, Indigenous women of color, queer people. It doesn't happen enough, in my opinion. And I'm just excited to be here and looking forward to talking with y'all more and answering questions.
We're happy to have you. Thank you. Chelsea?
Hey, y'all. My name is Chelsea Chisholm Vargas. My pronouns are she, her, ella. Born and raised here in Des Moines, Southsider. And I'm excited to be here with y'all as well. Great Plains, just shout out to y'all for even coming up with this event, wanting to take charge and hosting it. This is a really, really critical conversation. And I'm so thankful, Rocky, that you're here to give that insight from what's happening in Texas, because I know all eyes are on Texas right now, especially when it comes to reproductive justice. Folks want to know what's happening, how we can support. And we have faced so many similar battles here in Iowa. I've been fortunate enough to be organizing in this space of sexual and reproductive health for about the last 6 years. And it's been an absolute roller coaster with the way that they've tried to really criminalize abortion and just restrict everyone's access in every way possible. So it's important to talk about, and thankful to be here. Outside of this, I'm also a doula, so that brings kind of another perspective as well. And I organize full-time with Des Moines Black Liberation Movement within our advocacy department. So coming at this very much from a reproductive justice background, and wanting to make sure that Iowa families have futures here, and that this is a good place to raise your family if you choose to. So excited to be able to have this conversation with y'all.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to start the conversation off today by asking Rocky some questions so we can get some more context about what's going on in Texas. I mean, essentially, it's an emergency, right?
Yeah, it's an emergency. I'm hoping to inspire people who are not squarely rooted in abortion access, reproductive justice advocacy, or organizing work, that whatever their issue area, movement, field is, environmental justice, labor justice, economic justice, whatever it is that you're doing, just putting out with all of my heart and everything that I can, the call to all of our movements to take up the abortion banner loud and proud and as much as possible, because we need everybody defending abortion. What's happening in Texas, it's really hard not to feel like, our movements allowed the fate of abortion access and care to rest in the hands of one frail old Supreme Court white woman. We have come to the edge of this cliff so many times in Texas. We have legislative season every 2 years. So every 2 years, Texas lawmakers just throw everything that they can at abortion access. And fortunately, we've had a SCOTUS intervene in our favor. We've had providers who were brave and resourced enough to challenge, Texas laws and take them to the Supreme Court. And watching the Supreme Court decide to not intervene in SB 8 this time around has been a difficult reality check for abortion advocates everywhere. So on September 1st, SB 8 went into effect. And there's a couple of, I'm going to refer to my notes here because I get upset. So I'm trying to stay on track. But essentially, SB 8 abortions bans abortion at 6 weeks, which is 2 weeks after a missed period, before most people know they're pregnant. This is not new in terms of legislation that Texas has tried to create and other states have tried to create unsuccessfully. But the especially horrible, difficult thing about SB 8 is the criminalizing language that it uses around this ability for any private individual to be able to sue anyone else who helps someone get an abortion. So imagine this, you're like Joe, Texas, and you've got a Confederate flag and you hate abortions and, you know, people of color and anything that's not, you know, MAGA related. And you know, find out by the way, or do some sleuthing or whatever it is, that some person that you don't even know is, you know, helping another person that you don't even know to go and get an abortion in Texas. That Joe Texan, he's got the right all of a sudden to sue the person who gave the pregnant person a ride to the abortion clinic, who helped them pay to get out of state to go do an abortion, whatever it might be, whatever like assistance. And if they win in court, then they're allowed to collect a $10,000 bounty. That's the language that SB 8 uses, a bounty, a $10,000 one for each abortion, right? So they're encouraging this anti-abortion, misogynist, fascist group, like subgroup of people in this country to go out and make money finding people who help other people get abortions, right? And preventing people who want abortions from actually having them. It's extremely disgusting. Besides the language of bounty in SB 8, they also frame helping someone get an abortion as aiding and abetting. That's the language that's used in the policy. So anyone who is found to be aiding and abetting someone getting an abortion is you know, subject to being sued by any individual in Texas who cares to. And again, if they win in court, then they collect a $10,000 bounty. And so this is obviously scary on a lot of language, on a lot of levels besides the criminalizing of language. It is the most extreme anti-abortion legislation that has been passed in the country since Roe v. Wade. It is unconstitutional, you know, what I try to impress upon people who are now paying attention to abortion, because it's this big sort of hot button, you know, very in the media thing, is that when they come for our bodily autonomy, like when they are able to legislate our like autonomy and our right to decide what happens to our bodies, that is a gateway, that is a bridge moment, and it opens the door to copycat laws. So unfortunately, oftentimes in the United States, you know, things go the way that Texas goes, you know, and it opens the door to those copycat laws in other states. But in addition to that, it has the ability to affect anything from, you know, family welfare cap type laws to other things that people might consider, you know, personal choices or choices of bodily autonomy. I don't think that it's too extreme to say that, you know, we're a step and a skip away from being told how many children we are allowed to have, or who is and isn't allowed to have children. You know, I don't think that this is something that anyone anywhere should take lightly. And I hope that across the country people come, to defend abortion, not just in Texas, but across the country. And like I said, that folks from all movements that, you know, don't maybe focus on abortion and see it as a niche issue, leave that idea behind and understand that when the US government is allowed to legislate in what happens to our bodies, and when policy is such that they are allowed to govern our bodily autonomy, then they're coming for everybody. They're coming for all of you. So abortion is a gateway. Abortion access is a gateway, either to liberty or to, you know, what I consider to be fascism. So I'm going to pause there because I know that's a lot.
That was really well said. Thank you. I have a much better understanding of what's going on there now. I do want to know, like, as an organizer, you know, I imagine that right now, like within your spaces within Texas, like things just must be like really not okay. So
yeah,
what is the environment like right now?
Yeah. So front lines are, peopled by a couple of different sort of groups, right? So My most direct experience is as an abortion funder. So for folks who don't know, abortion funds are usually grassroots organizations, but sometimes like sub-organizations inside of abortion clinics. And what we do is we raise money, and we have helplines that people can call, and they say, I need an abortion and I can't pay for it. And we have, MOUs and agreements with the clinics. And so we say, okay, we're going to pay for, Maria Garza's abortion, and we pay so that Maria can have their abortion, right? It's very simple. We fund abortion. That's what it is. In terms of practical support, we have teams of volunteers that offer people a ride. We pre-pandemic, we had folks who were going to the border, picking up folks from the border area who needed to access the abortion clinic in McAllen, Texas, which is like a good 45 minutes to an hour away, driving them to the clinic, waiting for their appointment to be over, and then driving them back to the border or anywhere else in South Texas that, our service area is. So transportation, lodging, childcare, airline tickets, bus tickets, gas money, whatever it might be. So it's that practical support, and then that direct funding of the actual abortion, either medication or procedure, or even like the sonograms in Texas, you have to pay for a consultation, then wait 48 hours, and that costs you $100, and then you can maybe get your abortion. So in terms of abortion funds, there are many in Texas. I want to say we're about 7 right now. And we have a coalition that is strong, and it's a few years old. And we, as a community, Texas abortion funds have been in discussion about what we have referred to as the post-Roe scenario. Like, we've been strategizing and working to prepare for what happens if and when they overturn Roe, right? So this is not like all of a sudden, like, we've been talking about this and strategizing and preparing for this for a long time. And we're funding abortion at the same time and trying to support folks. So you have that sort of frontline practical support, abortion funding line of defense on the ground, right? And that's all over Texas. And I cannot say enough about Texas abortion funds. Just Google Texas abortion funds, Texas Abortion Fund Coalition. Just fund them, find them, lift them up, share them as much as you can, because we are essentially the network that allows people to get their abortions. And then there's our providers, right? In any other healthcare scenario, abortion providers, this is physicians, folks with MDs who provide abortions. They are a very special and specific class of hero because of all of the restrictions and like clinic closures back in 2013 through 2015, and the confusion about where one could or couldn't go, ambulatory surgical center requirements, all of this sort of mess that we experienced some years back caused a lot of confusion. But we have abortion providers in this state who travel from city to city because there are so few providers available for the hundreds of abortions that are needed per clinic, per week. And they are working tirelessly and effortlessly to band together. And it was actually 2 sessions ago, or 1 session ago, for the last Texas legislative session, where there was extreme restrictions being proposed. Whole Women's Health actually banded together and put together a successful lawsuit and took the state to court and was able to get a lot of that overturned. And this sort of group of abortion providers, these doctors, these miracle workers, these saints, they do so much more than you would expect any medical professional to engage in. They engage in advocacy. They're engaging in direct client care. They're, working with the staff of their clinic who are overworked and exhausted, and they are right there, attending to folks who need abortion, and always with the utmost love and care and respect. And they just do such an amazing job. So our providers are our advocates. They are our number one, frontliners. They're right there. They're performing abortions. They're, under a lot of scrutiny all of the time. And like I said, they travel back and forth all the time just to be there at a different clinic in a different city where they may not have an in-house MD who is, specialized to provide abortion. And then on the advocacy end, Texas Abortion Funds, as well as organizations like Avow and Jane's Due Process, and organizations that, do policy work and, legal work around, supporting minors to access abortion. These are the folks who are, on the front lines of the policy side. They're the ones right there tracking all of the garbage that Republicans and some Democrats, unfortunately, are throwing at the wall during a legislative season. And they are there are defenders. They're, in the Capitol. They are developing bill language. They are reviewing policies in depth and finding the little tiny bits of, language that, may lead to something. And our policy advocacy folks are, a big part of that frontline defense. And then I would say the last big on the ground defense that we have would just, be our supporters, So we have all of the Texas abortion funds are part of a national network. So we're members of the National Network of Abortion Funds, and the National Network of Abortion Funds is over 80 abortion funds and clinics across the country who are doing the same work. And through our network, we are able to have the support of teams of lawyers who are willing to support our work. And we're not just in touch with lawyers now. This is part of being an abortion advocate, right? Is that you have to be, you have to know, what's right with the law. You have to be careful. And so we're privileged enough to have this big, beautiful network of advocates and other abortion funders who we know if something happens, they're going to have our back. If you look at the National Network of Abortion Funds or any abortion fund outside of Texas, you will see all of them shouting our praises and directing folks to support us in our work right now, because we're a network like that. We are a family like that, and we stand together. And honestly, I guess I'll just cap that off by saying that being an abortion advocate, being part of the National Network of Abortion Funds, being an abortion funder, being an abortion fund founder and board chair has been one of the most difficult, emotionally exhausting challenges of my life. And it's something that I do because I am Indigenous, and because I'm queer, and because I'm the mother of a trans man, and because I have nieces and nephews and family members who are, still living in the border and are on the border area. And, Frontera Fund serves that South Texas region, which is one of the most impoverished regions in the country. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So the front lines look a lot of ways, and we are very supported and resourced, but that doesn't generally tend to automatically equal a policy win for us. And now with the skewed Supreme Court, we just have to be on extra defense. And so that's sort of my summation of what the ground looks like here.
Thank you for that work, that long-term work, and thank you to everybody on the ground in Texas. What will these abortion funds be affected in this? I mean, obviously, I'm thinking they will. They'll be affected in the same way that somebody helping someone get an abortion would be.
Yes,
right? You're going to be facing lawsuits and.
Yes, that is we are fully expecting for that to happen at some moment or some time. We don't see the bounty for aiding and abetting someone getting an abortion as it's not benign. There is an organized right, conservative, fascist strategy out there, and they are resourced and they're organized. And so, yes, it puts us all at risk. We have had to, some funds have shut down temporarily to update websites and make sure we're all in compliance. We've had to do a lot of compliance.
How can you be in compliance though, when, I mean, basically anything that aids an abortion is not in compliance, right?
Well, aids and abets someone having an abortion after 6 weeks.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, normally what we would do is, if somebody was, 9 weeks pregnant or 12 weeks pregnant or whatever it was, we would fund that abortion to the extent that we're able to fund it. So we've had to restrict what we can fund. And we have had to, say no to callers. We've had to deal with the incredible amount of like people who don't really realize what's going on, like folks who are not really maybe tapped into like the legal or the policy aspect of this stuff. And, they call and they're in a situation and they need an abortion and we can't help to an extent. And we're working to figure out, how we can support people to get their abortions. And what I can say and what I will say is that if you are a Texan or a Texan who needs information about abortion and what's happening in Texas and what potential options are, then you want to go to needabortion.com and find out about abortion funds and things like that at that website.
So what happens if people leave the state?
I mean, at this point, the law is so like the language is just these like big, broad brushstrokes, right? So like if someone is getting in their car and deciding to, drive to New Mexico, for example, where there's a clinic in Albuquerque or, what have you, they can do so. The law is not about attacking or suing people who are having an abortion. It's about going after folks who are aiding and abetting and supporting them to, I'm going to stop saying aiding and abetting, I apologize, who are supporting them to have an abortion. So it's not like the Georgia law that we saw earlier this year or last year, where it was illegal to leave the state. Like that language doesn't really exist in SB 8. But folks can go do whatever the hell they want to do, right? Like if you need to go on a road trip for whatever reason, you can do that. The way that it impacts, abortion advocates and organizers is by supporting someone to do that in order to get an abortion. Okay.
It reminds me a lot of the Hyde Amendment and what Indigenous people have already been facing for 40 years since like abortion was made legal in this country. There's never been an abortion performed, a legal abortion, a colonizer abortion, if you will, or like a federally funded, state funded abortion ever performed on any reservation. Women on reservations, or childbearing folks, on reservations have had to travel very long distances in order to get them. And in fact, many people are unable to get them because they do not have the funds or the ability to travel these distances in order to get these abortions. So this is what this is reminding me of right now, what I'm seeing right now. I do, and we'll talk about this a little later, but I do hope that Indigenous sovereignty comes to the rescue here in Texas, and we need to really focus also on getting rid of the Hyde Amendment. And I would love to turn it over to Chelsea and talk about Iowa for a little bit and see how that fits into what's happening here. So Chelsea, can you tell us about, Iowa? What's going on in Iowa and what might happen because of what's going on in Texas?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely can touch on what's happening in Iowa. I do just want to reflect a little bit too on what you were talking about, Rocky, just because, Texas is a big old state. And so already before this legislation, Texans were having issues accessing abortion. Even now, if you want to leave the state of Texas, depends where you're at, how long it will take you to get out of the state. the benefits, like you said, with Texas being big, is you folks have been able to, over these years, build so much power for abortion support. But at the same time, then that means there's so many people who need abortion access. And it's just, it's a pure crisis what's happening in Texas. It already was, but even more so now. And I definitely look at Texas and look at legislation that happens in Texas and think what's going to happen next in Iowa. What could they make happen in Iowa? You touched a bit on that little caveat of, if you're someone who's supporting the abortion, that's how an individual can sue, right? An individual can take you to court. So this is something that we haven't seen before. This is what makes it tricky for the state. Here in Iowa, we've faced, a lot of anti-abortion legislation, 72-hour waiting bans where you would have to have multiple appointments between these periods, 24-hour waiting bans. In Texas, they had an abortion ban during COVID. Right at the start of COVID. In Iowa, we saw it as well. Governor Kim Reynolds came in quickly saying that it's not a necessary, timely procedure, which is the absolute opposite, as we're seeing with the 6-week ban. It's absolutely timely. It's absolutely urgent. It's absolutely healthcare, and it's a human right. You have a right to access an abortion. I am curious too. I believe with the stuff happening in Texas, someone can harm those who are supporting, but what if someone chooses to perform an abortion themselves or to have an abortion themselves and doesn't tell any other parties? What are the ways that folks can be protected in this? It's absolutely rough, and it leaves folks, like you're saying, scrambling for solutions and what to make happen. Here in Iowa, yes, we've had quite a few waiting periods. We had a 6-week abortion ban as well, but it was overturned, fortunately, due to, I believe it was like a 2018 ruling where they were citing, time constraints. So right now in Iowa, you can have a legal access to an abortion past 6 weeks. That doesn't mean it's easily accessible, right? A lot of Iowa is rural. We see health centers closing all over in rural Iowa. We saw our Planned Parenthoods defunded, and I believe it was 2017. And as a result, we saw four Planned Parenthoods across our state close, resulting in higher STI rates, resulting in just lack of access to education, lack of access to birth control. So these numbers, right, they're clearly related. When they're trying to cut back on sexual and reproductive health care, it creates health crisis often in rural areas of Iowa where they're already not able to access healthcare as easily as other folks. But cost of abortion access in Iowa is absolutely bananas. I believe like the average cost, at least from what I see, it's about $750 to get an abortion. No assistance from Medicaid, of course. So we have one abortion fund here in Iowa, formerly the Iowa Abortion Access Fund. It is one of the oldest in the country, so we're very proud of that, but we always need more help. With one abortion access fund, they're only able to help a certain number of people. So it's not easy, even where it's legal. It's not easy to get an abortion in Iowa. Recently, we've seen, and we say this all the time, some of the most strict, most serious new pieces of legislation. We are facing the constitutional amendment to ban abortion in the state. So what legislators are trying to do is they've passed so many bills that have been struck down by the courts here in Iowa that they're saying, okay, we're done messing with the courts, although they've also stacked the courts to their favor. They said, we're done messing with the courts. We're just going to change the Constitution. And so what we've seen is language introduced saying that abortion is not protected. It's not a protected right in the state, and that no taxpayer dollars will go towards abortion services. That's already the case, right? Taxpayer dollars, like you were saying, Sakawis, due to the Hyde Amendment, are not going to support abortion access, unfortunately. So the constitutional amendment to ban abortion did pass in this most recent legislative session. It does need to pass through another General Assembly. So still with our next legislative session in 2022, it's already good, it's already game. We need to wait until a new whole General Assembly happens in either 2023 or 2024 for them to pass this legislation again. Once this constitutional amendment goes through 2 General Assemblies, then ultimately it's going to be a ballot measure for the people of Iowa to vote it up or down if they want to see that change in the state's constitution. So this is a very serious measure, something that, trying to undo something like that is would be rather difficult to, again, then try to change the state's constitution again. So things are stacked against us. Similar to Texas, all branches of our government here are at Republican control. And Iowa's been leaning that way for a while. So we're really trying to see what other ways that we can help people get abortion access when you're living in, these deep red states. Texas, the South, the Midwest, we as well are having to kind of look out to these coastal states and beyond, just beyond our own regions to access abortion care, which we know, like I mentioned, is a human right. You should be able to decide what you do with your body. And like you were saying, Rocky, when they're deciding what you can do with your own body, that's what freedom is about, right? That's literally like the heart of what it means to be able to make decisions and have autonomy over yourself. So definitely trying to see what are other ways that folks can get abortion access. There's a lot of great options now with pills that are available that are super safe, that people are trying to find ways to mail these, and people are doing it all over the world. We see abortion laws all over the world. And even now we're just seeing so many, like we saw Mexico recently with just monumental changes. And here in the United States, it's only going backwards. And so really, like you said, Sakowis, we're left just realizing we're living in a totally Christian world where they get to decide what we do with our bodies and when, and we really have to dig down into our roots and find out, what is our truth and how are we going to be able to access that? So Iowa, Sakowis, you mentioned this too. As soon as that legislation was enacted September 1st in Texas, we saw these Iowa Republicans saying, okay, let's try to reverse these already made decisions. And then at the same time, in the same breath, they're saying, oh, well, it's not that we're trying to ban abortion, but their actions speak otherwise. So even when Iowans speak out against them, they're being gaslit by their own politicians saying, oh, no, that's not what's happening. But every single piece of legislation shows the opposite. So it's difficult for Iowans to hear one thing and then see another, but Iowans are smart. Iowans know they deserve access to abortion services. So if this constitutional amendment does go to a ballot, I trust in Iowans, but at the same time, we'll have to be organizing our asses off, right, to make sure folks know how to vote on this ballot measure. So that's really where we're at right now. And I'll just say as well, with legislative sessions coming up, of course, we're going to see more attacks on abortion. We can count on that. Just how creative they want to get, what other states they want to copycat is what we'll find out. But we know we're already going to have to be on the defense. That's how we've been having to live in the state of Iowa.
It's always been a defensive fight, unfortunately. We, like I said earlier in the conversation, we have an infestation of a white Christian problem. It's a white Christian heteropatriarchal problem, actually. But there are many women as well that also support bans on abortion, and that's disturbing. A lot of these women voted for Trump. This is like, and these people yet are a minority, or becoming a minority in this country. So I just hope that the Christian ideology doesn't infiltrate so far into our BIPOC communities that we can't overcome that as well. Because we also have to remember that there are, this isn't just, a white Christian problem. It is essentially like that's where it's rooted from. That's where it comes from. But that the sickness of colonization has, is throughout many of our communities. And we have to also convince our own people sometimes, that this is something that is necessary and an absolute right. And it shouldn't be questioned, period. Like, just not at all. And, this is why we're having this conversation today, because we need to communicate across state lines. This is not like this can't just be a state by state thing. Like, we're going to have to support each other as these abortion bans become more prevalent. What's going on with Planned Parenthood and all the other groups in Iowa right now? Are they preparing? Are they talking? I think Planned Parenthood has a lawsuit filed against Kim Reynolds that will be, I think they'll be going to court in 2022 at some point. Do you know about that?
I think Planned Parenthood always has a lawsuit against Kim Reynolds. I mean, she's always up to no good. And like you were saying too, Rocky, we have to be in touch with lawyers to immediately intervene and tell us what the law is and what we can take action upon. There's been a few lawsuits. There was a lawsuit where they were fighting against Kim Reynolds due to the temporary halt on abortions during COVID, and that was met with an injunction. They were suing the state due to this legislative assembly passing a law that would make it so Planned Parenthood can't get sex ed funding. So, I mean, they're always at battle, right? That's just kind of the reality again here in Iowa. I'm not really sure exactly how Planned Parenthood's moving right now. I think they're getting ready for legislative assembly here in January, trying to get the word out about what's happening in Texas. But I feel like these are conversations that these groups have always been having. This, like you said as well, you know, with the way the Supreme Court went, it was just a reality check. But folks have been ringing these alarms forever. We've known that abortion access, that the opponents of abortion access are heavily well-funded. They figure things out. They're organizing as well. And they're good at what they do. But here in Iowa, there's not enough, I would say, organizational power that happens to support abortion access. We see sexual assault coalitions, of course, supporting abortion access. But besides that, it's really just individual people, right? It's really just Iowans, everyday Iowans. However, when we see so many lobbyist groups that are for the opposite side, their voices tend to be louder. They tend to have more control. They definitely have more control, more connections to legislators. So I think Iowans are just kind of, I think a lot of Iowans are ready for the constitutional amendment and to see what they can make happen. I think, at least for myself, that's where my mind is going. But for myself and other kind of independent folks, we're really looking and have been talking about, you know, how do we get folks to access abortion? How can we make abortion more accessible? How can we get more abortion funds happening? We're really just relying on our community resources. That's just how it is right now. And I definitely think we could take some tips from Texas by building just more of a state coalition to make that happen. Once we do see these awful limiting abortion laws happening in states, you know, what can we do to really come together in defiance? So folks are kind of all over the place, but most of the action, I would say, happens in January. So for this to happen outside of a legislative session, I guess it gives folks some time to organize.
And speaking of organizing, I'd like to ask both of you, what are people doing, like literally at the front lines, like in terms of protest? What's happening? Is there protests planned in Texas? And I know there's without a strike.
Yeah, so there'll be a few coming, but I think it's a unique moment, right? Like after the summer of George Floyd, and there being so much like collective consciousness around like the need to uprise and the need for people to like be in the streets, on top of being inside of the isolation of a global pandemic and a just, you know, global shit show, disaster, being disconnected from each other. You know, I think that we're in a moment of like coming back into that. My organization, Austin Justice Coalition, just had a rally at the Capitol here in Texas on this weekend on Saturday. And it was interesting because our executive director, Chaz Moore, if you're there, Chaz, hey. called together a group of folks that, were cross-movement advocates to address the fact that not only are abortion rights under attack, but we saw this session a cross-movement just decimation of civil liberties and freedoms. They attacked voting rights, they attacked labor rights, we just saw across the board, just such aggressive, conservative, and I can't say fascist enough, so I will, fascist legislation and policy around these things. And so, we said, let's talk about what it is, what is the people versus Texas, right? Like on Saturday was September 11th. That was 20-year anniversary of the events on September 11th. And we have been force-fed this, this messaging about freedom and freedom isn't free and liberty and all of this, only to have Texas come through and slash civil liberties and slash freedoms to frankly, a terrifying place. And so we put together a rally kind of last minute in a matter of days. And we had thereabouts, I want to say 350 folks come to the Capitol to be there to hear folks that we brought from around the state and a lot of local organizations speak on these cross movement, issues and attack on those liberties and freedoms. And it was nothing compared to, obviously what we saw last summer. Austin Justice Coalition, before I was a staff member there, Austin Justice Coalition had, a rally where there were tens of thousands of people. They flooded the streets in Austin. And, I think that that's great and that's amazing. And, we have the Women's March coming up on October 2nd. And I have a feeling a lot of folks are going to turn out for that, specifically because there is an abortion rights issue on the table right now. But honestly, for me, rallies and protests are important. It's a sort of church, right? It's a let me go be with my people and sing my song and yell my rage, and that's important. And also, I just, people are tired, and they're exhausted and they're fatigued. And I just, besides the Women's March and plans coming up, in that regard, I don't personally know of any big rallies or anything like that happening. But I will say too that those of us that are on the ground in terms of abortion advocacy, we're seeing major shifts and updates. We did not expect the Department of Justice to intervene. We did not expect SCOTUS to not intervene on our behalf. And so, well, whatever, we kind of did. But that's just to say that there are these constant developments, and it's almost it's just hard to say let's get together and have a rally for abortion rights. Like I said, I think the Women's March on October 2nd will stand in for that, and we'll see a lot of turnout for it. But that's kind of where we're sitting. And I wanted to say too, just that just going back really quickly to the issue of access in Texas, is that the border region, so that whole border of Texas down by Mexico, while all of Texans will have trouble accessing abortion in this new under this new law, folks who are undocumented, of which there are many living on the Texas border, cannot travel more than 100 miles away from the border without going through an immigration checkpoint. So the border region in Texas is almost like this in-between place. It's not quite the US, it's not quite Mexico, and it's actually quite easy for undocumented folks to cross the border and live within that region. But if you're undocumented and you're trying to get out of the Rio Grande Valley, you're trying to go to San Antonio, or you live in, El Paso or Laredo, and you're trying to get to Austin or to Dallas or somewhere out, and you don't have the documentation to do that, then you can't go. So this is also an immigration issue. If you cannot leave the the region in which you live because you don't have the proper immigration documents, then you're stuck there. So even if we could pay for everybody to fly out and go somewhere else and have their abortion, there is still a huge population of the community that we serve that can't go even with those resources. Excuse me. And so it's really it's just terrifying. It's heartbreaking. We want folks to understand that, like, this affects everybody. This affects all of us. So for folks in Iowa, who are preparing, I would say get in the face of your cross movement partners who maybe aren't repro, and let them know this is going to touch you in some. If it comes down to Iowa, it will hit you in some way. And so, you need to get all of your folks across all the movements to come and stand behind you and get prepared, and prepare your defense and prepare your strategies, because it's not a single, this is not a, nothing is, but it's not a single issue situation. I have a lot that I wanted to say in terms of the white Christian problem, and I guess to try and keep it short, I will say that the argument that conservatives use that is rooted in Christianity and white Christianity and in patriarchy is obviously like everywhere. It's, we deal with it all of the time, but, early repro rights, white women-led repro rights groups, I feel that in my opinion, they played into this argument with the conservative Christian right about, how many number of weeks is something really a baby or a human or a life, or when does conception begin? And they engaged in this colonial conversation about number of weeks equaling some value of life, and it's bullshit. And so the fact that so much of the repro abortion rights movement founded on that white colonial understanding that, like, oh yeah, we have to talk about, it's actually not life when it's 6 weeks or 12 weeks, or it's not life till it's 22 weeks. I think that was a huge mistake. And we're now paying the price of white women's, colonized minds and inability to understand that, for someone like myself, for example, and I would just speak for myself as an Indigenous woman, I believe that, I believe in life at conception. And I also believe that, my gods have given me the authority as a person with the uterus and the ability to bear children to decide what souls pass through my body and which ones don't. They've given us the authority to shape humanity. It's why we were given uteruses to, be the bridge and the vessel for that. And so I can easily say that my religion fundamentally includes abortion as a natural part of my role in this world. And I feel like Indigenous ideologies and beliefs for those of us who practice them traditionally or religiously or whatever it may be, I know that a lot of our relatives, Indigenous relatives, have fallen into the Christian colonizer mindset. But if you go into a uncolonized, a decolonized Indigenous perspective, then the power to be able to give birth is something that's granted with great authority. And there are channels and deities that are designed to take care of that. And so it is not a moral issue, and it is not a transactional issue of deciding what's life at how many weeks. That's white Christian colonizer understanding of life and birth and existence, and of the Indigenous divine in general. And so my hope is that we can expand the conversation about instead of arguing with the Christian right about how many weeks is life and what's okay, that, there is this entire other spectrum, of understanding of religion, of practices that would never do something like outlaw abortion. And in that way, my religious freedoms are being impeded on, and all of those other people who can bear children.
Thank you for all that. That was wonderfully said. That is so succinct, actually, exactly how a lot of Indigenous peoples view, the birth of a, of a child, or not the birth of a child, whatever the woman chooses. Um, and that's very powerful. And I'm so sorry to see the emotion you're having to deal with. I know this is very hard. I appreciate you being here to talk about this right now, and to take the time during so much going on. Chelsea, I was hoping you might want to weigh in, because I did want to touch on the Women's March, actually. We're already facing problems here in Iowa, as usual. BIPOC folks are trying to, get the show on the road, if you will. And then there's, I myself, even in a chat recently, for a march here in Iowa City. I'm being told to, temper my voice about Christianity, and I'm like, I don't do that. Like, we don't. Sorry, but I have a very firm policy on how I discuss Christianity, and it's it's like a no, just no across the board. And once they put their borders, their laws, and their ideologies on this land, they created, you know, uh, genocide and colonization, and just sorrow and heartbreak. And so, we need to stand up to that. That's what we need to talk about. The heart of this really does come down to that. And anyway, so back to the Women's March. Like, how do we deal with the white feminism constantly pushing against, BIPOC folks and the way we do things?
Yep.
How do we do that? What do we do?
Yeah, and well, I mean, I can speak to it here in Iowa, but I think even nationally, folks have really understood the Women's March to really be a white women's march. That's just how it is, and that's what we're seeing here as well in Iowa. As soon as a Women's March group started for this October 2nd date that they were planning, it was, I saw white folks in this chat saying things like, we need to center marginalized voices. And while I think they have, I think they mean good when they say that. It's like, you're already on the wrong foot if you're saying we have to center them. Why is everyone not at the table already? And that's a legitimate question. And the reason is people don't want to engage with that group. People have been very put off from the Women's March here in Iowa. And so as we saw, and as we're still seeing, we have some young Black, Indigenous, people of color, mostly women, some queer folks as well, that have really tried to infiltrate the space and said, no, like, this is not how this Women's March is going to go this time. This is about us. This is about our issues. And the formal Women's March organizer was like, this isn't about racial justice. This is about abortion. And it's critical that, like you were saying, Rocky, we need to bring everyone in. Right? Like, abortion access is everyone's issue in so many ways. So we're seeing some organizing around this October 2nd date, and some folks really trying to infiltrate and have a march that really brings in everyone's voice and everyone's perspective, because everyone's abortion story is going to be so different, and the circumstances that everyone faces is going to be so different. Besides that, as well, I think it's important to march. I think there's a lot of value in that, consciousness shifting, just imagery and things that last. At the same time, we need to be thinking beyond just one day of action. We need to have so many voices in this fight, so many actors in this fight with us forever. Like, I'm seeing so many people right now have an opinion on abortion that I didn't even know they cared about abortion. And I welcome them, right? Like, awesome. Mm-hmm. You care about abortion access. I need you to do that all the time. I need you to do that where you work. I need you to do that in any space that you exist in. So yeah, I think as well, though, that there's going to be folks like myself, I'm sure folks like you as well, Sakawis, here in Iowa, that are thinking, what are our more long-term fights that we need to get involved in? Yes, this day of action is important, but our fight needs to continue beyond that, before that, and it needs to be able to operate outside of this legal scope as well. So yeah, I would say that's kind of what's happening in Iowa with the Women's March, and I imagine in other states and cities as well.
And I didn't want to say that it's not important to have everybody's viewpoint. It absolutely is, but that BIPOC folks, LGBTQIA folks, Two-Spirit folks, they face higher needs, and then also like for abortion, and then also like higher rates of lack of abortion already. And so, Indigenous women face the highest rates of sexual assault and rape in the country, and then also have the least access to abortion. We also face very high rates of drug and alcohol dependence, and therefore a need for women childbearing folks to access abortion as our communities heal, as they heal, and as we try to get through the aftermath of genocide.
Sakawas, I'll just jump in too. I think one of the first times that I met you was because you basically had to steal a mic at an event to speak on an issue from an Indigenous perspective. You know, that wasn't already included. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like folks that belong to groups that have been marginalized, they don't get the mic here in Iowa. You have to literally come for the mic. And it shouldn't be like that when we are the ones facing the most barriers to just even general healthcare in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to close up here right away, but I wanted to provide both of you with the opportunity to, for some closing remarks.
Yes, I thank you. I want to say thank you for making this space. It is not actually, it's extremely rare. This may be the second or third time that I've had the opportunity to publicly have a discussion between Indigenous women, specifically about abortion and repro rights. It's such an honor and a relief, honestly, to be able to do this right now in the midst of everything that we have going on. And I just want to thank everybody who's like turning up and showing up for Texans, for, folks in South Texas in particular, because that's my homeland and that's my people. And
we can support you how? Donating to the Frontera Fund, Austin Justice Coalition?
Yes, Frontera Fund serves the Rio Grande Valley. That is South Texas, and that is Frontera Fund, Frontera Fund, FUND, RGV, RioGrandeValley.org. We have received an outpouring of support, and we aim to use as much of that as possible to fund as many abortions as possible and help as many people get abortions as possible. I just want to say thank you. Continue to support the work. And whenever people are talking about, abortion, and there are no women of color, trans people of color, queers of color present, be loud and obnoxious about that, and don't let folks get away with that.
Thank you. Those are good words. We will continue to stay in touch, for sure. We're going to keep working together and building stronger and better. Chelsea, anything, any last words?
Yes. I mean, hey, shout out to Great Plains. Like I said at the beginning of this, thank you for having this conversation and doing it quickly. We're just 2 weeks after the SB 8 took law in Texas. So thank you so much for having this. I guess I would just say, abortions are forever. Abortions have been happening since the beginning of time. We touched a little bit on, now that they're being done in this kind of legal medical world, yes, currently, but as well, abortions are happening outside of that. Trying to make sure that they're safe is really the goal, safe and accessible. Abortions are not going to stop. No legislation is going to stop abortions from continuing in the future. So just making sure that people are safe and supported is really what I think folks should really be fighting for. Fuck what the law is. Like we deserve access, and if we need to make that happen ourselves, that's what we're going to do. Abortions forever. Definitely support the Iowa Abortion Access Fund. they're a great fund. And even outside of that, if you follow me on social media, you can usually find that I'm trying to fundraise for some stranger who has hit me up needing abortion access. I mean, I'm definitely always willing to help anyone in the state. And if you're not in my state, I'll still try to help you out and see what resources we can have. That's what I think one beautiful thing about the reproductive justice community is, yeah, we don't honor these borders, and we want to work together to make sure everyone gets the care that they need.
Thank you. That's very powerful. You're reminding me that maybe we should do a talk again sometime soon, discussing, Indigenous and Black and POC midwifery, and doulahood and all these other ways that we have long been caretaking our own bodies, stewarding our own bodies, and our reproductive rights. I think that might be an important talk to have too. So.
I forgot one thing that I think is important for me to say here. There is an amazing abortion fund run by some incredible Indigenous women that I know and love and have worked with, and it's called Indigenous Women Rising, and they are based in New Mexico, and just want to shout them out and all the work that you've done. So
yeah, they are great.
That this Indigenous Women Rising. That's my sisters, and support their work if you can. They are also very supportive of Texans, and as our neighbors have been incredible.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, they do really great work. So I guess the takeaway from this is don't sit on your ass. Get up and do something. If you can't get up and do something and you have financial means to support, please do it. If you don't, please try to share this information out. Try to get people active. We really need to do something now, and that means building these coalitions, getting money to lawyers. That's important right away. Like you said, lawyers are our friend in this matter, because that's the only offense we have, to be honest. So we gotta get that going. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. It was a real honor to speak with you both, Chelsea and Rocky. You have no idea how. See, now I'm getting emotional. You have no idea how important this is to me, and I know to you guys as well, and everybody that's watching right now. So let's keep pushing for basic human rights. Goodbye, everybody. Ahai ki tata mahin. Enjoy your evening.